Welcome to the Verdict Zone. Today's case is a story of foresight, friendship, and the heavy price of ignoring a warning label. We're calling it The Predictable Disaster. This is about a woman who fought her way out of a deeply unbalanced relationship, only to watch her closest friend willingly walk into the very same trap, despite being handed a detailed map of all the dangers ahead. Our subject, let's call her Jane, had just ended a toxic engagement. It was a long, draining battle to reclaim her peace and stability. Shortly after, her lifelong best friend, we'll call her Sue, came to her with some news. Jane's ex had asked her out. Now, Jane was faced with a difficult choice. She decided to give a transparent, caring warning. She laid it all out, the specific, concrete issues she had endured. Things like severe financial irresponsibility, where her ex would rack up debt without a second thought. She talked about his alarming lack of basic hygiene. And most disturbingly, she warned Sue about his manipulative reproductive coercion, pressuring her to have children against her will. Jane was careful. She framed this not as an order or an ultimatum, but as an act of sisterly concern. She loved Sue and didn't want to see her suffer the same fate. She handed her friend every red flag she had collected, hoping to save her years of pain. But Sue, perhaps believing she could change him or that her experience would be different, made her choice. She started dating him anyway. What followed was a textbook repeat of toxic patterns. The relationship progressed, and soon, Sue was experiencing the exact same issues Jane had described. The financial strain, the neglect, the manipulation, it was all happening again, just with a new person. And then, the inevitable happened. The crisis point arrived. Sue called Jane, distraught, desperate, and trapped in the nightmare Jane had warned her about. And Jane, emotionally exhausted and feeling the weight of her dismissed advice, responded with 5 simple, devastating words: "I told you this would happen." So, for the next several minutes, we're going to dissect the complex ethics at play here. This isn't just about who is right or wrong. This is about loyalty, autonomy, and the limits of our emotional responsibility to others. First, let's analyze Jane's initial warning. Was it a profound act of true friendship, an attempt to protect someone she loved from guaranteed harm? Or was it, even with the best intentions, an overstep? Did she inadvertently put Sue in a position where she felt she had to prove her wrong? To help us understand, let's hear from Dr. Anya Sharma, a relationship counselor who specializes in repetitive behavioral patterns. Dr. Sharma, when someone leaves a toxic partner, is it common for that ex-partner to seek out someone within the same social circle, maybe a friend? Absolutely. It's a classic manipulation tactic, whether conscious or not. The toxic individual often seeks validation. By dating a friend of their ex, they're trying to rewrite the narrative. They're implicitly saying, "See? The problem wasn't me, it was you." They target someone close because it isolates the original victim and creates social confusion and division. It's a way to maintain a sense of control and presence in their ex's life, even after the relationship has ended. The new partner, the friend, becomes an unwitting pawn in this power play. That's a chilling perspective. It suggests the ex's motives were likely not genuine from the start. But what about Sue's side of this? She had her own autonomy, her right to make her own choices and, yes, her own mistakes. Even if they were painful ones. We have to consider the possibility that from Sue's perspective, Jane's warning, no matter how well-intentioned, could have felt like a challenge to her judgment. Maybe she thought, "I know him better," or "our love is different." Let's bring in Dr. Marcus Cole, a psychologist who focuses on friendship dynamics and the concept of crisis fatigue. Dr. Cole, how does a friend's autonomy weigh against a direct, experience-based warning? It's one of the most difficult dynamics in any relationship. Every adult has the right to make their own choices, and we must respect that. However, that autonomy doesn't exist in a vacuum. When you have credible, first-hand testimony about harmful behavior, ignoring it isn't just an assertion of independence, it's a gamble. For the person giving the warning, like Jane, it's incredibly invalidating. She shared her trauma, her pain, as a gift of protection. When Sue disregarded it, she wasn't just choosing a partner, she was implicitly choosing to disbelieve or devalue her friend's lived experience. That's a deep wound to a friendship, long before any crisis happens. This brings us to the heart of the conflict, the crisis call. When Sue was in the thick of it, experiencing the exact patterns Jane had laid out, was Jane's response, "I told you this would happen," a necessary, hard truth? Or was it a cruel, unhelpful, "I told you so," that effectively abandoned a friend in her moment of need? This is where the idea of empathy depletion comes in. Dr. Cole, can you explain this concept? Is it possible to simply run out of empathy for someone, especially when you predicted their crisis? Empathy is not a limitless resource. Empathy depletion, or compassion fatigue, is a very real psychological state. Imagine you're a lifeguard. You tell someone not to swim in a dangerous, rocky area. You explain exactly why: the sharp rocks, the strong currents. They ignore you and swim there anyway. When they get hurt and cry for help, you still have a duty to rescue them. But your emotional response is going to be complicated. There will be frustration and exhaustion mixed in with your concern. Jane was asked to provide emotional triage for a disaster she not only predicted but actively tried to prevent. She had already expended a huge amount of emotional energy in giving the initial warning. When that warning was ignored, it's understandable that her well of sympathy felt dry. Her response, "I told you so," while perhaps not the most compassionate, is a very human reaction. It's a defense mechanism. It's her psyche saying, "I cannot relive this trauma with you. I already tried to stop it." So Jane's response might not have been about punishing Sue, but about protecting herself from being pulled back into the very same toxic vortex she had just escaped. It was a boundary, drawn in a moment of extreme emotional stress. Dr. Sharma, from a relationship counseling perspective, what could Jane have done differently in that moment? What is the ideal response, if one even exists? The ideal response is incredibly difficult and requires a level of emotional detachment that most people in that situation simply don't have. Ideally, you would separate the person from their choice. You could say, "I'm so sorry you're hurting. That sounds awful. Let's focus on your safety right now. We can talk about the how and why later." This approach validates their pain without invalidating your original warning. It puts the immediate need, the friend's safety, first. But we have to be realistic. This requires a person to act as a crisis counselor, not a friend who has also been a victim of the same perpetrator. It's a monumental ask. Jane's bluntness might have been a cry for her own boundaries to finally be respected. This painful situation really forces us to ask a difficult question, which is our moral judgment to ponder today. When a loved one ignores a dire warning about a person's character and then suffers the exact, predicted consequences, what is the moral responsibility of the warner? Is it to provide limitless sympathy and support, effectively absorbing the fallout from a choice they advised against? Or is it to uphold the boundary that their foresight and their own traumatic experience were dismissed, and protect their own peace? There's no easy answer. On one hand, friendship often means being there for each other, no matter what. On the other, true friendship also requires respect, and Sue's choice showed a fundamental lack of respect for Jane's experience. Jane wasn't just a bystander, she was a survivor. Asking her to re-engage with her abuser, even indirectly through helping Sue, is a massive emotional burden. Perhaps the responsibility shifts. Once the warning is ignored, the warner's primary duty is no longer to prevent the disaster, but to protect themselves from being collateral damage. Setting boundaries with the people we love is some of the hardest work we will ever do in our lives. It's draining, it's complicated, and it often feels like you're being selfish. But protecting your own mental and emotional peace is not selfish, it's essential. If you believe in the courage of foresight, in the validity of your own lived experience, and in the fundamental right to protect your own peace, then you need to join this community. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for the Verdict Zone. We deliver verdicts on loyalty, tough love, and the difficult art of self-preservation. Learn how to uphold your boundaries, and how to recognize when you need to. Subscribe now. Thank you for watching.